Hi, I'm Judy Farrell and this is the Chai Sessions, my podcast for Merchant City Yoga, where I talk with yoga pals old and new, trying to understand better what it is we're doing when we practice yoga and why we do it. This episode's the second in my short series, Ashtanga Love Notes. I feel Ashtanga's fallen a bit out of fashion and gets a bit of a bad rep for being too difficult, too rigid, and well, just old-fashioned. So I want to talk with friends who, like me, still practice and teach Ashtanga and still love it too. We'll talk about what we love, what keeps us coming back, and what challenges and highlights it's brought us along the way. Imagine these love notes handwritten and close to my heart. And so to my guest on this episode, Emma Isokivi. Emma's a devoted Ashtanga practitioner and teacher and is the owner of Ashtanga Yoga Edinburgh. She'd already been practising for 5 years before finding Ashtanga in 2011 with Karen Brenneman in what was then Bristol Yoga in Edinburgh. And that's where I met Emma too. She was part of a group training with June's CYS Scotland yoga teacher training, which was being partly hosted at Bristol. I'd come back from 3.5 months in Mysore, southern India, early in 2012 and joined June to help her with the training. Emma then assisted her teacher, Sarah Durney-Hatcher, at Meadowlark Yoga in Edinburgh for over 6 years, before taking over managing and directing Meadowlark's Mysore programme herself when Sarah moved away in 2019. Emma's still practising regularly with Sarah and also studies with Sharat Joyce in Mysore, where she received his blessing to teach in 2017-18. Now, Meadowlark sadly closed its doors earlier this year, but not to be deterred, Emma's bought a former yoga centre with the aim of building a long-term home for the dedicated and diverse Ashtanga community in Edinburgh. I was really excited when Emma not only agreed to join me on the podcast, but came through to Glasgow so we could chat in person. I start by asking Emma about her Ashtanga story, and she talks about the shopping phase of her yoga practice, how her experience in a Shivananda ashram in India shaped what she was looking for, and how she found her people. We talk about the old days and explore how our practice and teaching has changed over the years. We also share our thoughts about the notion that Ashtanga with its set sequences is boring, about how these days people have access to so much more information about all of it than we did when we started, about being confronted with the things you don't think you can do, and Ashtanga here. It's a thing. Honest. When we talk about what keeps Emma coming back, she says, "There's this moment that is just pure gold for me, and it strikes me every single time when I step on the front of the mat. There's always something that illuminates and cuts through and gives me some hope." This love note could have been a whole lot longer. It was so much fun to record, and chatting in person with Emma brought me joy. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we clearly did. Welcome to the Chai Sessions, and I'm really excited this time to be talking to Emma from Ashtanga Yoga Edinburgh. And I'm so excited that Emma's agreed to come and chat to me as one of my little love notes to Ashtanga Yoga, a wee podcast series that I'm doing here for Merchant City Yoga. So Emma, I'm talking to people like me who've been practicing and teaching Ashtanga for a really long time. And so I thought maybe we'd start with just a little bit about your Ashtanga story. Like what got you started with Ashtanga?
Maybe a teacher was maybe the start of it. Would have been Karen, now Kirkness. But actually, it maybe goes back a little bit further because I was in what I call as the shopping phase of my yoga life. You know, when you're like going through the aisle and you haven't got a shopping list and you're just tasting some tasty samples. Actually, no supermarkets now have like deli samples, but you know, when you're like, oh, I'll try that new cheese.
In the old days.
In the old days. Really, you know, when you're trying out lots of different styles.
Yes.
And I was a big runner and would go to yoga classes in a gym and did Bikram and wasn't allowed to go to the Iyengar Institute because I couldn't sign up to 3 days a week because I was a broke student in London at the time. And the pivotal, I think, moment for me with the daily practice piece of the puzzle was I spent a month in the Shivananda ashram not on the teacher training.
Okay.
It was just
so quite different then from Ashtanga.
Yeah, but it was a total shift from the. I had been doing lots of Bikram yoga classes, purely asana only based classes, and then I ended up in a Shivananda ashram in Madurai in southern India. It wasn't a teacher training, it was just a month residential that you could go. There was only about 10 of us, and I suddenly was confronted with the 5 a.m. satsang bell going off, chanting and doing pranayama for 2 hours before even doing an asana class, before even eating a meal, and then cleaning, and then doing philosophy classes. Right. And then doing the same again in the evening, and realising that I really had been doing about this much yoga. And was like, holy smoke balls, I haven't really been I've just been doing some postures.
Yes.
And that was the linchpin. So that was 2009. Okay. And then I came back to my flat in London and was like, with my book, trying to figure out what on earth to do. And then I eventually moved to Edinburgh, and I was seeking. I was in the trying to find a daily practice, a place that I could practice, and not just a vinyasa class that was teaching more than just postures.
Yeah, because that's what you'd experienced while you've been away then.
Yeah.
You got a flavour, I got a taste. Yeah.
A little taste. It wasn't Ashtanga, but I got a taste of the tasty treats, yogi treats. And then I think I went to 2 of Karen's power yoga classes, and she was like, you should come to the Mysore program. And I was like, sure.
Okay.
And
no idea what it is.
Literally never done an Ashtanga class in my life before.
But that's, maybe that's better, because, we were speaking earlier about actually it can be really intimidating coming into a Mysore class. So actually ignorance is bliss then. Until
I opened the door and was like, whoa, what's going on? What is everyone doing? But it was also the best thing ever, because I had incredible teachers, and I remember that first year I had quite a lot of teachers, because there was lots of guest teachers that would come in, and I was exposed to all of those things. I remember the first time I heard chanting, I was like, oh, I remember that chant from the Shivananda Institute, and it was like coming home. And I was like, this is my place. These are my people.
Yeah. You're
cool. Or not cool. You're willing to do the work and dig in and practice daily. And I think I was practicing 3 days a week for the first year in the community, but then I would just do namaskars and standing on my own in between my back-to-back shifts in a Michelin star restaurant while welding. I was doing an arts residency. And so it just continued to grow from there, and I was in a very, very fortunate position that I was really supported by incredible teachers like Sarah Donny Hatcher and Karen and other teachers that were in and around the community that I was in, that then supported me to then even go to Mysore, back to India again. So I'd been to India, I'd spent 4 months in India, but I had travelled through Mysore.
Right. Didn't stop.
Didn't even know what Ashtanga was.
No.
I was just a little baby. I was 19, 20. I feel like the shopping phase, I feel like, is a really important phase, though, because I knew what I did want, and by the time I came to Ashtanga,
it's almost like trying things out for size, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's a good fit? What works?
And I also feel like some people fit with Ashtanga, and although we try to make the practice accessible and available to everybody, I do. I know you do, Judy.
Yeah.
But I also know that certain people are probably more drawn to, at certain points of their life, to different elements and aspects of practice as well.
So, I think I said to you beforehand, one of the reasons I thought having these conversations would be a really nice idea is because I have a sense just now that Ashtanga is maybe not as popular as it once was. And, there are other classes and styles of yoga that people seem to be more attracted to just now, and I'm kind of intrigued as to why that is, and I guess the other piece of that is, when you look at the socials and online and stuff, Ashtanga sometimes gets some criticism and has a bit of a bad reputation, a lot of which I would take issue with.
Yeah.
But wonder what your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's changed a lot, even within the scope of 10 plus years, massively. I definitely was taught, and especially because my connection with the institute in Mysore, except for Shura, has also changed a lot as well, but I was taught in a much more of a traditional, strict kind of way.
Yeah.
However, there's definitely been a big evolution.
What I fondly call the old days.
The old days.
The old days. Yeah.
And I'm not sure. I think there's two sides of it. I think that can be very attractive, that like strict, rigid, rule-based practice, because it can really support people, especially.
Yeah, and you know where you are.
You know where you are. Like for me, going from that Shivananda book, trying to figure out the sequences in my flat and what to do as a stiff runner, like I started practicing and I couldn't put my hands below my knees in a forward fold. Like,
yeah.
And so having that structure and having someone be like, hey, this is your practice, these are the paradigms, you can't move beyond X until you can do Y, was very, very valuable for me.
It gives you a framework to work out, a container, doesn't it?
It's like being a chef.
Yeah.
It's like, my mum is a cordon bleu trained chef. Grew up with butter and cream in my life. It's been a hard life. But she was a cordon bleu chef, and she always talked about, the rigidity was actually gave her the freedom. And I feel like, I don't know whether it's because of the time I am in my Ashtanga life, or whether it's because of the evolution of all the conversations or the way that we now teach, but I definitely am more progressive in my teaching than I would have been 7 or 8 years ago. Yeah.
And I mean, part of that is definitely just your natural evolution as a teacher. Isn't it?
But also as a practitioner as well.
You become more confident.
Yeah.
The piece about learning the rules in order to be able to break them, there's that part as well, so you understand a lot more about what's going on. And the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is just a couple of times actually in the last week or so, I've heard Ashtanga being talked about as a sequence.
Yes, the Ashtanga Vinyasa sequence.
And so what I heard was the people limiting Ashtanga to simply being
a sequence.
A sequence.
Yeah.
And I wondered what you would say to that, because obviously I immediately felt myself getting all woof, 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 woof. How very dare anyone think that Ashtanga is just a sequence. Mm-hmm. But I wondered what you would say to that.
Yeah, I think it's hardly scraping the surface, but I guess also it depends on how you've been exposed to it. Like for anyone, for example, for a student like myself who came to the Mysore room and only learned Surya Namaskars in that first class and heard chanting and there were people doing pranayama, like I got exposed to a really multifaceted practice straight away. I was incredibly fortunate. Like I don't know if that's entirely normal. While someone who maybe has just seen a sheet, or they're following a video online, or they've come to a class that doesn't, maybe in a gym that doesn't talk about anything other than posture work, I could totally understand why somebody might come across that and be like, well, that's not for me, or maybe it is. And then that's the thing, like for a lot of people, and I think especially in our modern Western yoga world, postural work is the thing that it definitely was for me, draws you in. It can be the gateway.
It's the doorway, isn't it?
Very rarely as a teacher I come across people who are like, I'm a meditator, I have a regular meditation practice, and I need to be able to sit for longer, or I need to be able to sit with for more ease. I would say it's 1 in 20. I don't know about you, Judy.
I don't know, no, not even.
I get very excited when people like that come into my room. I'm like,
nowhere near.
And so there are special unicorns, students like that, and so you can work. You work in a different way with them, and that's a real treat and a blessing to be able to do that. And it's got to be a much more practical practice, and like I definitely have a lot more the structure or the series or the sequence, these kind of words. I definitely am a lot more adaptable around it, both in my own practices and then also in the way that I now teach, because it's got to be appropriate to place, time and circumstance. And when I was 20 years old, it was totally perfect place, time and circumstance to be doing a 2.5 hour long asana breath work.
Not doing that so much now.
Maybe once a week. And a couple of medium. My teacher Sarah always talks about this, like as a mild, a medium, and Mridu, Madhya and Madhya from the Yoga Sutras of like a mild, medium and intense practice. Yes. And so like we have different lengths of practices, different intensities of practices, and it therefore means that I can practice 6 days a week. If I want to practice 6 days a week and I expect myself to be able to do a 2 hour full series or big intense practice, whatever that looks for you. I wouldn't be able to do that 6 days a week and have 2 small children running around and run a yoga studio and teach for minimum 3 hours every day, sometimes 5 hours.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't be able to do it. So there's this like variation, this push-pull, and I think that's I've also been fortunate that I've had teachers who talked about that. While I think if there was this dogmatic, you have to always do it this one way, I might have quit.
Yeah, I think for me what's I'm becoming much more aware of as time goes on is there has to be a sustainability about the practice, and certainly what I found is that those 2.5 hour practices every single day definitely not sustainable. And that's even out with the kind of the added responsibilities of work and family life and everything. Even just in my body and at this age and stage, it's something not sustainable, and I want to be able to be doing this like for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So certainly it's been something that's much more at the forefront of my mind as well. How can I make this work that I'll still be able to do it?
It's a devastating concept to think that I would not be able to practice yoga asana. I'm just going to say that out there. In 30 years' time, that's a devastating concept. So it's like I'm in it for the long game, and so it's like I still want to be doing trikonasana. Like if you were on a desert island, what 3 postures would you throw back at you? You're supposed to be into. But I know, I've got a few that I really want to still be doing.
I don't know, because I find it really funny because most mornings when I get on my mat, I'm like, here we go again, I've got to do all of this again. Oh my God, this is so hard, this is so blah, 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 blah. But then, over the last few years, I've had a number of different injuries that have definitely put the kibosh on my practice for a good number of weeks or months at a time. And I can't tell you, during that time, how frustrated I get. It would be the perfect excuse to go, do you know what? Just take it easy, take some time out. That's the hardest thing to do. And if you're in my head every morning when I'm whinging about how hard it all is all the time, I'm like, why can't I just appreciate this time off? Why can't I just appreciate this forced time of rest? But nope, I'm like, what can I do today? How can I make it challenging and juicy, and how can I get that feeling and that sense out of it again today? So maybe one of the things I'd like to know is throughout the ups and downs that are obviously going to come with a practice that has lasted for over 10 years for you, what is it that keeps you coming back? What keeps drawing you back?
There's I don't know how verbally successful this is going to be.
Let's give it a go.
Especially for me, because I practice early in the morning, normally before I teach, or in the morning at some paradigm, if I can manage to. Partly because I've got young children, and it just is the time that works best for me. That's not me saying that everyone should practice at that time. But there's a moment where I've opened up the studio, and I've turned the lights on, and I'm rolling my mat out, and nobody else is there. And it's totally quiet. And sometimes if I'm lucky, there's a shard of sunlight coming through. But we do live in Scotland.
Yeah.
So
moonlight.
Variable.
Howling gale.
The concept of Brahmamudra is variable depending on what hemisphere of the world you live in. But whatever, I'll still take it. There's a candle, fine. I've made a small offering to our puja table, and there's this moment where nobody else is there. There's no student is there, and it is wholly my own space and my own time. And sometimes it's as little as 30 minutes. I'll not say that it's that 2 hours. And sometimes it's as much as an hour and a half, or sometimes more if I've managed to get up early enough. But there's this moment that is just pure gold for me, and it strikes me every single time when I step on the front of the mat. And sometimes I step on the mat, just like you say, Judy, and I'm like,
so
here
tired.
I go again, so tired, why am I doing this? But somehow there's always some glimmer of hope, some sweetness, some breath, some mantra, some sensation, some physical, some mental space that is more than enough to be able to cut through all the other fuzz and chatter.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I can put a word on that, but there's always something that illuminates and cuts through and gives me some hope. And sometimes it is really hard, the whole practice, and it's like you dig it, you're digging it out.
Yeah, I hear you.
Like, in the trenches. Just digging, and you're like, somehow normally I always still feel better after practice. That's sometimes enough. Yeah. And like I have to go back and like in my early days I don't so much anymore, but wrote a lot of journals. And like,
oh wow, that would be really interesting.
Super interesting. As in, like, I've cracked them. Like, I would write them every day after practice or before practice. Wow. Just like 5 minutes, not a lot, much. But if you're in early days of practice, please do that. If you've got time and not children running around or mice or program to teach. But I would always, and like, there would always be something that would draw me in and pull me back, and excitement either about an asana or the quality of the breath or something. It can be very small and trivial. But enough to lynch me in and capture my attention. And like that's what, like, I think there's something about the quietude, the mental quietude for me. And I don't know if I can get that in a busy class in someone else's class or later in the day. But for me, that early morning is like the gold dust. Mm-hmm. Because the rest of the day can be quite busy and quite noisy for me.
Yeah.
And so having that time and that presence with yourself in all of the diversities of good, bad and ugly and mental chatter is like, can be really hard, but it also can be really, really special. And that's like the linchpin of what keeps me coming back, because it is about the physical, but it's also about a lot for me to do about the mental.
Yeah. And how do you feel about some of the conversation around Ashtanga, because it is a set sequence or sequences, being too rigid or even boring? I'm saying boring with a funny look on my face, because I am okay. Like, it is anything but boring. But from the outside looking in, I can understand why people
absolutely
might have that perception.
Yeah, and I wonder if I had come across Ashtanga and the sequences in my earlier life, earlier shopping days, I would have said the same. I wonder if I would have as maybe. Well. I don't know, we can't go back there. But I could imagine I could have been very easily, I wanted it bigger and harder and faster.
Yeah,
and hard.
It's a kind of interesting one, isn't it? Because I'm thinking it's like there's a kind of contradiction now, because I certainly remember back in the days when I started, I had no idea what the other series looked like. I didn't even... The only reason I knew what all the postures in primary looked like, unlike you, was because I had landed myself in a full-ed primary class for my first Ashtanga class. So that's the only reason I knew what they all looked like. So I had no idea what the other series or sequences looked like. Whereas these days there is so much information out there. People have access to everything, and I find it a little bit of a contradiction then it's actually now, when people have got access to so much information about all of it, that it's now that it seems to be less. It's not the one that people choose so much anymore. Whereas back in the day, when none of us had any idea what we were getting into,
but it nearly made it. There was like an elixir, like, you know, this like, the next posture.
Mystique about it.
Mystique about it. It's nothing mysterious. But I do think there is still some mystery about it, Judy, because like, you know, like for me, and this concept of the word boring is like, it's just an invitation to be able to teach a practitioner beyond the sequence and beyond the paradigms of a postural practice. Like that for me is like just what I was talking about the getting to my mat and finding some breath. It's like that, like the subtleties of that and the like excitement about the subtleties of those things. If I was doing a different series of postures every day, I would have absolutely no chance of dropping down into the subtle aspects of practice, whether that's philosophy, whether that's breathwork, whether that's chanting, I wouldn't need to expand my toolbox if I was constantly just being entertained by asana. Does that make sense? Yeah, and this is not me slamming vinyasa class, I promise. Because place, time and circumstance, and sometimes you need to be able to do that, to be able to turn your brain off, or to be able to stay focused. Like, I definitely use bigger postural work as a way to be able to keep my mind sharp. Like,
definitely. And I mean, definitely for me, that was one of the first things that I noticed kept me coming back, and it was the bigger, more challenging postures, not because I wanted to be able to do them, but because I somehow noticed or realised that was when I really had to concentrate. And if I wasn't completely there, then you fail, you lost it. And so with something, because back in the early days, I always used to say that I had a love-hate relationship with Ashtanga, because when it felt good, it felt amazing.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time it was really hard and really, really challenging. But actually, it was in it being really hard and challenging that held my attention. Like, I couldn't think of all the wild stuff that was going through my head at all the other times. And I think for me, that's one of the things that kept me coming back, even though it was really hard, was because there was some kind of appreciation there that was helping me hold my attention and focus a bit better.
This is also the problem with the social medialization of our yogic world, is that there's an expectation that every single practice is going to be a great practice, because that's what we see in our social media spheres.
And we're looking for a certain experience from it. Like, the implication is that we're looking for that certain experience, and if we don't have that certain experience, it's not working.
And it's not exciting.
Yes.
So, and I think there's a need for breaking down the barriers. Like, how many good practices do you have a week?
Oh my God.
Like, how many
define good practice, yeah.
But as in, you like get off your mat and you're like, oh, that was great.
Nailed it.
And like, okay, fine. I know we're laughing about this, but as in the practices where you're like you were focused and like you have some liberation in your body. Like, set the bar. Like honestly, how many good practices do you...
So probably none or all. Do you know what I mean? So if we're talking about, I nailed that today. I was flowing, I was smooth, I was with the breath, I was steady, I was focused. Probably none or one.
One.
None or one. Like, we could probably go per month. Rather than per week.
That sounds so depressing. I'm really sorry. We're not selling it. Ashtanga.
Come to Ashtanga.
Come to Ashtanga. It's going to be really hard.
Popular.
You're not going to love it.
But if you're talking about how often did I turn up with myself as I was, even if it meant hauling my ass through the practice, rather than feeling that it was all light and floaty, and how often did I keep bringing my attention back when I got distracted, and how often did I finish the practice feeling a bit better about myself and about life and about everything else than I did at the start? Probably most days.
Exactly.
Every day.
But so this expectation is like, I maybe have one practice week where I'm feeling like pretty fly. Like, look at me. Nobody else can see me.
Stay there forever.
And then like a couple of practices are really hard. Like the drawing yourself through, and then like rarely ever, just like you said, Judy, do I get off my mat and I'm like, well, I feel worse now. Very rarely.
Once in a blue moon,
once in a blue moon it does happen.
Probably a bad call, ill,
I
whatever.
Probably had a bug that was like, and then I'm in bed for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Which I don't have much time to do with two small humans. So there's the titration around that. But they're you're in it for it, and like that the willingness to still show up and do the things that are hard, like they are so much more valuable for me. Like, even if I think about the asanas that like were that I now can do, that like it took me 5 years to figure out how to do, they are my most exciting asanas that I get the most excited about to teach and to do in my own practice, because I know the dig and the passion and the drive and the skill and the puzzle unpicking and the journey.
Sometimes I do think maybe I'm just stubborn.
Maybe just stubborn as well. But I feel like we're skillful crafting yogis. who've had to learn. Like, I've learned so much on the way, on the journey of that asana. Like, I remember like one of the asanas I was learning where I just got really pissed off at my teacher. I was really, really rude at an assistant. And I remember like being utterly mortified. And it was just like an expression of like totally from myself, all about myself. But like the way that it manifested was like the most ugly thing ever. And I was like, whoa,
where did that come from?
And I really need to check myself and learn a lesson from that. And like, what a beautiful thing to have something like a tool that we have the ability to be able to do that. I will wholeheartedly say that I have cried on my mat more than I have anywhere else in the last 15 years.
Right.
Because it's so confronting, this practice, like, and this series. And one of the beauties of this, when you talk about series of sequences, is you are affronted to do things you most definitely don't want to do.
Oh my God. And actually never thought
you would be able to do.
Or you would entertain
the idea of doing
it.
Yeah. And so it invites you to stay with the course and figure out how strong you are and capable you are and resilient you are, and like your ability to show up is like how incredible of a life lesson that is. Like, we don't even need to talk about what postures they are here.
No, because actually in this whole conversation we've not talked about specific postures at all. And you know, certainly for me, kind of big picture, one of the things and one of the key things I think Ashtanga specifically has brought me is that courage. Because some of the postures, like you say, are really confronting. They're physically really challenging and demanding. And even to be confronted with them every day, knowing that you possibly might not ever be able to do them, but you're still having to do the work. And then when I look back over the span, actually I've ended up physically being able to do so much more than I ever thought was possible. And it's kind of cool in and of itself, but where I think it's really cool is when I then look at how that's leaked out into life and the choices I've made and the decisions I've made. Probably much braver than had I not. Now, obviously we'll never know, because I don't have access to that parallel life where I didn't walk into that lead primary Ashtanga class. And I didn't have a very good friend who kept dragging me back for the first couple of years when I wanted to escape. You know, and I think that's where Ashtanga for me gets really interesting, is where it leaks out.
Absolutely. And like, this is why I think why sometimes it can get a bad rep, Ashtanga, is because if you're not willing to dig in enough, aka do the work, you're not going to have those experiences. And so, you know, I can't imagine you had that experience after your first lead primary series class. You probably were just confronted by pain and sweat.
Hysteria. Yeah, hysterical laughter, otherwise I'd have been sobbing.
So the invitation to, like, you know, to cultivate that, like, it's not particularly glamorous. And
I'll tell you what's not glamorous, Emma, is Ashtanga hair.
Ashtanga hair is not
Post Ashtanga hair.
But I still have not found the perfect hairstyle.
Me neither.
I did Princess Leia buns on the side for a while, and then I started learning Ekapada, Shirshasana, and that didn't work.
Plaits for a while, like down each side, and then, you know, I was like, I am far too old.
Two-sided plaits.
Two plaits down the side away.
I have contemplated doing the full early day Keena McGregor of just shaving my hair up.
Oh wow!
Because Keena did that like early on, early on in her Ashtanga life. She was like, I just shaved. I don't know if she did it because of postures. I think she did it because of the like renunciate.
Hopefully, there's a whole lot of other stuff going on there. It wasn't just to get yoga postures.
No. I deeply have contemplated that.
Much as I love my Ashtanga, that has never even entered. Never even entered my head.
Maybe just like a line down the middle. No, I still not found the perfect hairstyle, but there you go.
Yeah,
I will chic. But you know what? I feel like also the sign of a very messy bun and hairstyle is a sign of and like a smiling face and a sweaty body is a sign of a really good yoga.
Okay. So maybe back when we were talking about what's a good practice, maybe we should have been talking about hair success rather than How good was my hair?
Which
during
therefore would
and
not
after
look good on
practice?
social media in any shape or form. Just imagine putting that video or that photograph up online. Like, everyone would be like, ugh, gross.
So
which is why we don't put it up online.
Yeah, we're maybe not selling.
You wanted me here to sell Ashtanga.
No.
I'm not undoing it, but I feel, I you know, regardless of all of those things, of the physicality of things like hair, I do feel like there's so much that keeps me coming back. And
yes,
for me also, the very early days, the progression piece of the puzzle, like if anyone's
yes,
the like physical progression, the bigger the bigger toolbox progression was the thing that kept me coming back as well. Because, you know, in my early 26 postures of Bikram yoga days, I've been doing that for years, just a handful of times a week, but like I was kind of getting bored. And like, I could have, there wasn't much space to be able to drop down into anything else other than just the posture. That was what was invited.
The shape.
There wasn't like somebody going to teach me how to chant X or do a different pranayama practice. There was no spaces for that, and the Ashtanga spaces facilitated all of that as well. So that's one of the things that being able to grow the toolbox was one of the things. Because,
and I think for me as well, it's not just a linear progression. That there's something about, especially now that I've been practicing a long time, that there's a kind of evolution of each posture as well. And I mean, my appreciation now of what we might call the basics or the foundational postures, like if I don't get to do anything else, I'm really happy to be doing them, and they are still changing and still evolving. You know, I'm not practicing them in the same way that I used to, so it's almost like that linear progression feeds back and into postures that we've been doing for.
And like you said, Judy, it's like the concepts of attention as well. Like, I feel like if we're able to keep our attention in a posture as simple, I'll talk about a posture as simple as Janu Shasana A. If we're able to keep our attention and be excited in the breath and be focused on the prana and the bandha and like using those Tristana elements, like if we're able to be attentive and not just like driving through, like, is that not like, maybe that's not what it's all about, but like that for me is like, I'm trying to move towards more of that stuff rather than the big postural pieces of the puzzle.
I mean, I had this conversation yesterday about Surya Namaskar. It's, you know, for a lot of people it's the warm-up that they have to get through to get to the good bits.
Yeah.
But actually, the more I do it and the more I teach it, that's everything is in there. Yeah. All the elements are in there. The beginnings of the pieces of the puzzles that we'll need later on, it's all in there. And then, you know, it's layered up with the, like you said, the Tristana practice, the energy, the focus, all of that as well. And, you know, if we were to practice Surya Namaskar with that kind of attention, that's enough to change and make a difference. Yeah. Even if we're not practicing some of the trickier postures every day, it will inform our experience of them.
I guess maybe also because of the early, like I was assisting in the Mysore room from fairly early on, like 2 years into my Ashtanga practice, despite the years of other yoga before, and I was, you know, supported a lot. And Sarah used to talk about this as like the Mysore mapping. It's like being able to see like everything can come back to the standing sequence in the Namaskars.
Yeah.
And like you can, like if you're willing to dig it out, and that's a bit of David Greek as well. Like if you're willing to dig it out and search for it and be the seeker and still be excited, still be in the beginner's mind, like that, like is far more interesting as well.
Definitely. I mean, I'm still joining dots. Yeah. Like joining dots between the postures. I
feel like cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I love seeing when people start to join some dots as well, that they're not just going through some of the motions and doing what they've been invited to do, that actually they're realising, because it means they're starting to think about it in a slightly different way.
Yeah, 100%.
As well. So as a teacher, I find that really exciting.
Very, very. And it's like, I definitely feel like the teacher as a teacher, you have a responsibility for that, and also your fellow other practitioners. Like, give a shout out for your community members, especially I feel like an Ashtanga community is a pretty, like, I've been setting up a studio recently, and the Ashtangi Mysore community are just a different breed of yogis. Fairly resilient, diehard, and willing to show up in all different circumstances, and especially those who've been practicing for a long amount of time. And I feel like some of the newer students in our community are learning a lot from the more established communities because of either a conversation in a corridor, or they're practicing beside each other and they're watching how somebody else navigates something or moves through a new way. And it's like the same, the older practitioners are getting excited for the younger it's a really special thing for me to be observing the community also supporting the growth of the Ashtanga lineage and the Ashtanga excitement as well as it not just being the teacher who's the one who's responsible for that. It's great.
And I think for me like an important piece of that is that, you know, because yoga, it's an individual endeavour, but actually we're doing it in connection or in community with the other people who have a similar practice, a similar approach as well. And
I still remember from the very early days of practicing, there was one practitioner that I practiced beside for the best part of a year. We'd never gone out and partied or drunk alcohol. You know, I was 20 when I started practicing Mysore style, and 2021.
You're lucky thing.
And like, I had all the friends I'd had before that, you know, you'd been out late and, you know, partying, all the totally different kind of relationship. And I just practiced beside her every day for a year. And like, we'd been for a cup of tea or two by the end of it, and knew each other's name and a little bit from the changing room, but very little. And then she moved away, and I remember being crestfallen. Like, I remember sobbing because I was devastated. She was my buddy. Like, I didn't know really anything about her, but I knew what she was struggling in. I knew how the quality of her breath was and how she was doing that day. And she probably knew as much about me as well, because the intimacy of practicing and in that confronting and special way where you're showing up for yourself, you're showing up for your mat neighbour as well, is the most special bond that you can have with yourself and also with your fellow practitioners as well. And like, you can also do that for yourself at home as well. It doesn't always need to be in community, but that is such a special it's just an unsaid thing.
And it teaches us about ourselves as well. Like being in relationship with someone else, not in our relationship, but just being in relationship with someone else teaches us so much about ourselves as well, which we could possibly argue is one of the things we're doing with our yoga practice. Emma, I am now really conscious about time. Yes.
That went really quickly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For coming through to Glasgow. I'm so excited to be here in person.
Thank you.
Chatting. Really appreciate it. We could talk for a lot longer.
I feel like we could.
Maybe there's another love note in here somewhere. But for just now, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, come through and visit us as well. Absolutely. We'll take up one of our 12 mat spots.
Thanks, Emma. Emma's a passionate advocate for the Ashtanga practice supporting you in your everyday life. As she says, yoga isn't supposed to make your life harder. You'll find her and her team supporting a daily Mysore community at Ashtanga Yoga Edinburgh. So if you're in Edinburgh, be sure to seek her out. These conversations are of course unedited, but I'd like to shout out Steph Northcote for smoothing out the wrinkles at the beginning and end of every episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. You can even follow, rate and review to help others find us too. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.